I called this message In the Absence of a Crisis. Why? Because a crisis is an event that, if you think about it, proves we are all capable of change. You might say, I could never change, I could never do that. Well, if you had to, you would find a way. There are many extraordinary stories of ordinary people who showed supernatural strength or bravery. Mothers who have been able to turn over cars to rescue their baby trapped inside. People going back into burning buildings to find a missing loved one. If you had to, what could you do? For example, what would you do if you had to come up with a ransom? On a slightly less dramatic note, what about fasting? You might say, oh, I could never fast, I'm always so hungry. That sounds just like my husband. But what if you were forced into a situation where going without food for a long period of time was just what you had to do? What would happen if your car broke down in a very, very remote place and you were stranded for days or even weeks? And yet we hear of stories of people who have done just that. The point is, even though we may not think it, when you really have to, you are capable of change. But how do we change in the absence of a crisis? I think we have to come to a place where we can generate an internal crisis, even when we don't have the luxury of an external one. Tony Robbins, a famous American motivational speaker, said, "Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change." I'll repeat that. Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Change hurts, and that's why we don't like it, because fasting is hard, and so is saving, and so is right-siding a car. But if we could do it, if there were a crisis, how do we generate the crisis to enable change? Because obviously, staging external crises is not the way to go. I don't regularly get someone to hurt my loved ones at planned intervals just so I can rescue them from an overturned car. That's not part of my exercise routine. But if you can generate an internal crisis because you think about the pain of staying where you are, as opposed to whatever pain it's going to be that's going to take you to get to where you want to go, then that's when we make the change. It takes drastic action, and these passages, there are 3 different movements that will help us. Is Elisha not demonstrating drastic action when he chooses to give up his affluent lifestyle, his family, set fire to the yoke and eat with his friends to be with the servant to Elijah? That is drastic action. And what about Hernan Cortez, who in 1519 arrived in the New World with 600 men, and upon arrival made history by burning his ships? This sent a clear message to his men. There is no turning back. 2 years later, he succeeded in his complete conquest of the Aztec Empire. When Cortez arrived in what is Mexico, his soldiers did not want to fight. They were tired of the voyage, the natives were not friendly, and it was a strange land. Cortez, who wanted to conquer this land, would have none of it. To motivate his men, he burned his ships to the waterline. They were now all faced with a stark choice: fight or die. We will die or we will succeed, but there is no retreat. Or as Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. Are you drastic in the action you're taking, or are you soft and lukewarm with your desire to make a change tomorrow, or the next month, or the next, though it hasn't happened yet? Drastic action is called for, and I wonder if you're willing to do that. Why is drastic action so necessary at the beginning? It's that first domino, remember from last week's message, that eventually knocks over the empire state building of change in your life. It's the knocking over of a first domino that is the drastic action that makes the change. It's drastic to knock over something when everything is standing up straight, but something has to give, something has to light the fuse. It takes a spark to get a fire going. Without the spark, you can pile up all the kindling you want, but it's not going to happen until that first spark of decision is made and that line is crossed over. It's hard by design, but necessary to overcome what is called inertia. Sir Isaac Newton, 17th century English mathematician, physicist and astronomer, theologian and author, is famous for postulating the three laws of motion. The first law of motion, or what is described as inertia, is stated as objects will remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line until acted upon by a force. In the scientific model, the force is gravity. In our example, the force is drastic action. The point is, everything in the universe wants to keep doing whatever it's doing. It doesn't want to change. Everything is resistant to a change of state. We call that inertia. The word itself comes from the Latin word for slothfulness, laziness, or lacking in skill. Can you believe that? Everything in the universe is apparently lazy. That makes so much sense. Our default state is to stay where we are, not to move, not to change, because the first law of motion states that everything is lazy. This rock is so lazy. Look at it. That rock does not want to change. It doesn't want to move. It doesn't want to go anywhere. Hey rock, do you have any plans today? No, I'm just going to sit here. And if everything stayed the same, if there were no drastic action taken, 1,000 years from now, this rock would still be sitting here. If the table was removed suddenly, gravity would cause it to move. But other than that, the rock is not going anywhere because it wants to stay as it is. It would take a significant external force to move the rock because the rock has a great amount of mass. This feather, on the other hand, does not have a lot of mass and it can be easily moved with much less force. In fact, even a breath can cause the feather to move. I can move the feather easily because almost all of the external force goes into it, because less mass means less inertia. More mass, like the brick, means more inertia. So much of the force going into the rock to move it is spent in overcoming the inertia that not very much of it gets transferred through it. And that's why people can break bricks on their hands and have it not hurt at all, because the greatest amount of force went into disrupting the inertia and very little goes through it. Do you remember the old-fashioned mighty men from variety shows in the past? Do you remember how they could have bricks smashed upon them and lie on beds of nails? There was a great element of danger. The bricks became bigger, the hammer became heavier, the stakes became higher. And as your life goes on, the harder it becomes to change. The longer you've been entrenched in your laziness, your inertia, the easier it is to remain lazy and idle. But thinking about the mighty man example, it all comes down to physics. The raised sledgehammer is potential energy as it hits the brick. It is absorbed by the inertia of the brick. And then when it breaks, this energy is converted into kinetic energy, into the flying pieces. And almost none of the force gets transferred to the mighty man. Some of them go even further and introduce a bed of nails into the demonstration. This utilises another aspect of physics, pressure. Pressure is force applied over an area. If I were to lie on just one nail, that would hurt me very much. But if I were to lie on a bed of nails, because of pressure, force over an area, there would be no pain. Disclaimer, I haven't actually tried this, but the physics is sound, but I'm not willing to risk it. It is possible because the whole body is spread over this area. Let's get more daring with our mighty man. Now imagine we have another bed of nails upside down that is placed on top of the mighty man. Again, there's no pain because of the pressure, force over an area. And now for the grand finale. The brick is placed on top of the upturned second bed of nails with the mighty man sandwiched between. The sledgehammer is raised. We hold our breath. We cover our eyes or even turn our face away from the stage. The hammer swings. The brick smashes. Shards fly as the man lies still. Then he leaps off the bed of nails unscathed. The sledgehammer has force, potential energy, and it's used to dispel the inertia of the brick that doesn't want to go through a mighty man's body. It wants to stay where it is. So most of the energy disrupts the inertia and the rest of it gets blown out through the flying debris. The audience erupts in tumultuous applause. What an amazing feat, most are thinking. But the most striking thing about this performance isn't the perceived strength and pain resistance of the mighty man, or even the fascinating science behind it all, but that is a stark example of why it is so difficult to change your life. Because all the normal energy you apply to make change gets spent just overcoming inertia, and you're not able to use any of it to build up speed and get going. That's why baptism is so important. Fully immersed. It's a drastic thing to say to the whole world, I'm soaking wet and saved. I remember the day of my baptism. It's hard to forget. I was wet from head to toe and high-fiving God and hugging those all around me. It was a great day. It was drastic action. That's why fasting is so drastic. I'm not going to eat for a while. Why? Because I want to hear from heaven. I'm telling you it's drastic action to grab the food that you want to eat and throw it in the bin and to step on it for good measure. I'm telling you it's also drastic to delete some numbers from your phone because they're dysfunctional. It's drastic action to break up with someone who's no good for you. And God's got something better for you. And God himself is your reward. When you find what you need in him, then you can be brought into a relationship. It's drastic to say, here's the line. No more. The time for half measures is over. Otherwise, 5 years from now, you're an older version of who you are right now, but exaggerated. Drastic action is needed. The second thing I see in Elisha's story is steady progression. A steady progression, slow and steady over many years. What was he doing? Pouring water. All those years just pouring water. Drastic action tips over our first domino, but then what do we need? Just be consistent. It may not look like much has happened, just consistently pouring water. But then it did. Epictetus, the Greek philosopher, put it this way: no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, then I answer you, there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. You see, whatever change you want that's dramatic and sudden and instantly visible is likely not sustainable in the long term. You want things to go into the ground and compound interest to take hold. You want the process that God put in of slow and steady to win the race, because God always works in sowing and reaping, in seasons, summer and winter, and that we are found a year from now doing the thing that we were meant to do and thinking what could happen in 60 months and even what could happen in 60 years. What is it going to take day in and day out? Keep sowing, keep watering, keep dreaming, keep yourself planted. Small groups, life decisions, Bible, Jesus, prayer, save, work out the right choices, the right people, day in, day out, planted in the house of God and flourishing in the courts of our Lord. It takes the right things over time to get where we want to be. John Maxwell put it this way. He said, improvement doesn't happen in a day, but it must be daily. You cannot be changed by tomorrow, but small changes daily will enable us to get where we want to be. The third movement is when there has been drastic action followed by a steady progression that you can then enjoy momentum. Isn't it interesting the way that Elisha eventually comes to a place where slowly and steadily he's been filling up with his life with these small decisions, and then eventually comes to this dramatic place of momentum. In Newtonian mechanics, momentum is the product of mass and velocity of an object. It's a vector quantity and possessing a magnitude and a direction. Or to put it more simply, it's the quality that keeps an event, or in this case a person, developing or making progress after it has started. In the bed of nails example, when you think about what happens when just instead of one nail of drastic action, you have nail after nail, just how different things become. Force over an area. If you just take one thing, any one thing, there's a weakness to it. But if you take the single element of what you're trying to do and multiply it out hundreds and thousands of times over and over again, you get to a place where everything is spread out, and look what can happen in your life. And that's why everyone should be in church fellowship, connected by small groups. It's all about people in your life, loving you, helping you, encouraging you to spread the weight of your life around, to hold you up when you are weak. You need to be on a team. You need to be in a community if you are to thrive. And all of this leads to momentum. Why? Because inertia is a twofold concept. Newton said things that are rest stay at rest. But there's a second part to the law. Objects in motion stay in motion and do so in a straight line. So course correction and steering, followed by compounded decision making, eventually leads you to a pretty spectacular thing, and that's called inertia once more. You see, the space shuttle uses more fuel in taking off than it does in the rest of the flight put together, because it needs to break free from what's holding it to being an object at rest. But once enough force is applied, eventually it becomes an object in motion. Without friction or any of the things that cause us to be unable to slide forever in the vacuum of space, if I were to throw the same brick, it would never stop until it hits another star or hits a comet. It would just keep on going forever. Why? Because an object at rest turned into an object in motion will remain in motion. This is what's possible for you as you make the right decisions. Eventually you will come to a place where the right things have been set in place, and you just continue. It's hard to get off the ground, but you must, and you've just got to keep going. Here's the overview. It's difficult to take drastic action, often unbearable, and then the steady progression may be uncomfortable. But once you get to the phase where you've broken free and are enjoying momentum, you become unstoppable. In Jesus' name we say, Amen.